Hey guys, welcome to Algo Forces. So today we'll be going ahead with question number 2 of weekly contest 434, that is count mentions per users. Okay, so I'll explain you the problem first, then we'll move ahead for the approach and then we'll move ahead for the coding part. Okay, so it says that you are given an integer number of users representing the total number of users and an array events of size n cross 3. Okay, so any event can be of two type, message event or offline event. So as you can see this example, the zeroth index in any event is either message or offline. Now it says that in message event, the in the second index it is a timestamp, and then there comes mention string. Now the mention string in message event can be of three types. One is all, so it mentions all the users, then comes here it mentions all the online users, and comes the IDs. It can also have multiple IDs. So basically what we have to do here is we have to count the mentions per user. That is, we basically, let's say if there are two users, then I have to count how many times the particular user is mentioned in the event. Okay, so uh, let's say in the mention string, if the mention string is all, then we can consider that all the users, whether they are online or offline, are mentioned. If it is here, then it we can assume that only the online users have to be mentioned, and if it is given IDs, then we have to consider that only those IDs which are mentioned in the IDs in the mention string are only to be considered. That can be either online or offline, we do not care on that. Okay, now comes the offline event. So offline event can be only it can only be of one type, and it specifies that the user becomes offline at that particular timestamp, and he remains offline for 60 times of unit. Okay, so let's say in this offline, so the user 0 becomes offline at timestamp 11, so he'll only become online at timestamp 11 plus 60, that is 71. Okay, as it is mentioned here, it will become online at timestamp of 5 plus 60. Now we have to return an array mention which represents the number of user with ID I and has across all the message events. Okay, so I'll just explain you this example. So here we have two users. So this is index 0 and index 1 of the two users, and we are given events like this. So here the events are given in the sorted order of the timestamp only, right? But it might happen that the timestamp are not sorted. So let's say this event comes first after this. So we have to sort in this case because timestamp has always to be in ascending order only. Okay. So now comes this event. So it specifies that ID 1 and ID 0 aren't mentioned. So I'll increment the ID 0 and ID 1. So basically it becomes, so let's say it becomes 1 1. Okay. Now comes the offline event. So it says that 0 becomes offline at 11. Okay, so I do not need to do anything. I'll just specify the timestamp at which 0 becomes offline. So it is 11 and 0 because 1 has not become offline yet. And there comes message event. So that is, we have to specify all the online users at timestamp 71. Now, till now we have only user 0 as offline, and he has become offline at timestamp 11. So at timestamp 71, that is, it is 71 is greater than 11 plus 60, right? It is equal to 11 plus 60. So at timestamp 11 plus 60, that is at timestamp 71, the user 0 has come online. Okay, and user 1 is already online, so we have to increment this by 1 again. Okay, so uh, and we have to result and we have to return the final result, that is the number of mentions. So in this case it is 2 and 2. So I'll explain you the approach now. So let's take this example. So O means offline, M means message, and here for the offline, 0 means the ID 0 user has gone offline, and here means we have to consider all the online users. And similarly, if there is all, then we have to consider all the users, but in this example it is not there. So I'll take this example and explain you the approach. So first, I'll just initialize the result array by 0 0. That is, there are 0 mentions of any user, and the number of users is 2. Okay, here I'll just mention it, n equals to 2. Okay, now the first event is offline event, so 0 becomes offline at 10, and 1 is still offline. Oh, sorry, 1 is still online. So the for him the timestamp will be 0 because he is still online, right? Okay. Now comes M. For M, that is message event, we have to calculate all the online, here it is here, right? So we have to calculate all the online users at timestamp 12. Okay. Now at timestamp 12, the only online user is 1 because this will come online at 60 plus 10, that is 70. So here it would be 0 only, and 1 for 1 it becomes 1, the mention becomes 1. So we will return the 0 1. Okay, so this is the whole solution basically. And what is the time complexity? Time complexity is order of n, because we are iterating the mentions array only once, and n is the length of the mentions array. And the space complexity is n. It is also n because we are using arrays for tracking the whether the user is on whether the user is online or not. And for that we will be maintaining an array which represents the time at which he has got offline if he is offline. So the n here, I'll just mention it m. So m is the number of users. Okay. So now let's move to the coding part. Okay, so what all do we need here? I will need two arrays, one for calculating the mentions. I will make a global variable mentions, and I will also need one array, sorry, online at equals to null. So this will have the timestamp at which user becomes online. Okay. Now I will loop through all the events. Yes, and I also have to initialize it. Mentions equals to new integer number of users, and similarly for online at. Now I'll have to loop through all the events. Now this has three things. Every event has three things. Event type equals to event.get 0. Then comes timestamp. For timestamp, I will take integer equals to integer dot parse event dot get 1, and third is mention type. I will just make it users. Event dot get, this will be 2. At second index it will be users, so it can either be all here or id string. Okay. Now if event type equals to, I'll use equals message. So there are two types. It can be equals to message or it can be equals to offline. If it is offline, then I will just mark as offline. I will send the timestamp and the users. Okay. Otherwise, if it is message, then I will just increment mentions, and it will have timestamp and users again. Okay. Now In the end, I will directly return mentions array. Okay, now let's just tell these methods. So there are two methods. Increment mentions. It will have timestamp, and then comes string of users. And there is one more method, mark as offline. We have to complete these two methods, private void, and it will also have timestamp and users. Okay, so I'll complete the increment mentions first. Now there are three things. If users equals to all, it can be either all or it can be here or it can be id string. Okay, so in this case, if it is id string, I'll just split it by blank space. Okay, and so if it is all, then I will just consider all the users and I'll increment their mentions. I less than mentions dot length and I plus plus. So mentions of I'll just increment them. Okay. Okay, now if it is here, so I will consider only online users. I'll copy paste this part of code. Now if online at for I, if it is 0, then we can consider that it is already online, or if it is not 0, so for this case I have to add 60 and I have to check whether it is less than or equal to timestamp. If it is less than or equal to timestamp, it means that the user has come online at the timestamp, on or before timestamp. Okay, so in this case I will directly increment the mentions. Otherwise, in this case, I'll just loop through the IDs. ID in IDs, and I will increment their mention. So I have to take the substring id.substring from 2 to id.size, because the id string is of type id1, id2 and so on, and we have to consider only after 2 so that we can find the actual user. And I'll just increment mention of sub. I also have to convert it into integer. Okay, so and I have to also complete mark as offline. So in this case I will directly do online at of user. I have to make it user because only one user gets offline, equals to timestamp. I will directly to timestamp plus 60 here to track when the user is online, and here I do not need to add anything. So if the user is online at the particular timestamp on or before the timestamp, then I'll increment the mentions. So this is it. Sorry, this is supposed to be integer. Okay, and also when I'm passing here also I just have to pass the user, one user, and I'll directly do integer dot pass integer. Okay, and let's see if there are any more errors in here. ID This is supposed to be length. Now let's try to run it. Sorry, it has to be integer dot parse integer at line 10. Parse integer and for user dot split at line 43. At line 43, it has to be integer array, not list, because split method returns an array. Now let's try to run it. String, sorry, this has to be string. See, so this is the case which I wanted to show you. So here the timestamps are not in sorted order, and we want the timestamps in sorted order, right? So we have to sort this whole events list. And one more thing to notice here is at timestamp 2 there are two events, message event and offline event, and we cannot increment the mention and then mark it offline. We have to do it vice versa, right? Because if the 2 gets offline we cannot count it. So I also have to make sure that on offline event comes before message event. So in this case I'll have to do collections dot sort, and then I have to pass here events and event 1, event 2, and in this case I'll have I'll compare the timestamps first. Event 1 dot get 1 and event 2 dot get 1. So this is comparing timestamp. Now if the timestamps are equal, then I'll have to compare the message type also. Else I will return res. So if they are equal, okay, in this case I will have to return event 1 dot get 0 dot compare to event 2 dot get 0. Okay, so I have to make it event. So here see 0 is being compared, sorry, message is being compared to offline. So message is less than offline, right? So and also but we have to make offline before message. So I'll just make it minus. Okay, we missed a semicolon. Yeah, we also have to convert it into integer. And integer dot parse integer. Okay, sorry, I have to remove this. Okay, so this got accepted, and now let's try to submit it. Okay, so it is getting submitted. So this is it. So if you have any comments to or comments or any doubts, do comment in the comment section. And I hope you like and subscribe this video. Okay, then bye bye.